Welcome to the Redevelopment Commission meeting on October 3rd, 2022. The first item of business is roll call.
Deb Hutton here.
Deborah Meyerson here.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman here.
Randy Cassidy here.
Cindy Canarney here. Staff present.
John Zodi with the Land Department.
Christina Finley, and Department.
Barry Allen, legal.
And looking good.
Treasurer.
All right, thank you. Next item is reading of the minutes for September 19th, 2022. Any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Deb Hutton, I make a motion to approve the minutes as read.
Sarah
Deborah.
Bowerly-Dansman, I'll second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, minutes pass. Next item is examination of claims, September 16th, 2022, for $812,413.71. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, I motion to approve the claims of September 16th, 2022.
Deb Hutton, I second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next item of business is examination of payroll registers for September 23rd, 2022 for $34,420.88. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Deborah Meyerson, I'll make a motion for the payroll registers of December 23rd, 2022.
Randy Cassidy, all second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Motion passes. Reports of officers and committees. Sir, Director's report.
There is, Madam President. Thank you. Just briefly, tonight I just want to remind commissioners and members of the public that our letters of intent for the 2023 round of Community Development Block Grant dollars, or CDBG, are due to us by 4 p.m. on October 17th, so 2 weeks from now. So we are getting some in and look forward to the upcoming funding round. That concludes my report.
All right, any questions for Mr. Zodi from commissioners? All right, if not, moving on, is there a legal report?
No report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there a treasurer's report?
No report, but happy to answer questions.
All right, any business development updates?
Hi, Commissioners. Alex Crowley, Economic Sustainable Development. Just a brief update that we are in active discussions on several of the city's commercial spaces. You should expect to see some progress on those hopefully within the next 2 to 4 weeks, and we'll come back to you, of course, as always, with the specifics in terms of terms and that sort of thing at a future date.
All right, thank you. Moving on to new business. First item is Resolution 22-65, approval of match funding for resurfacing of Winslow. Who'd like to speak to us regarding this?
Can you speak into that? Okay, that's all right. Larry, do you know if Public Works is going to be here?
I don't. I thought Mr. Wason was going to be here to talk about it, but.
Okay. If we'd like to maybe move to the next item, Madam President, I can figure out maybe if someone will be here to speak on that. So.
All right.
Do that or move to the next meeting?
Yeah, I know we're moving along quickly here, so let me see what I can find out.
All right. While Mr. Zodi is investigating that, let's move on to Resolution 22-66, approval of construction inspection agreement for First Street Reconstruction Project. Who'd like to speak to us regarding this?
I'm sorry, I'll move over there.
No, it's all right.
Jump in here, Patrick. Don't be mad.
Hi, Patrick Durgas, City Engineering Department. The First Street project is reconstructing First Street from just west of Fairview down to College Avenue. We'll replace the signal at College and First. The project is a full reconstruct, new sidewalks, tree plots, and full reconstruction of the road, replacing utilities as necessary for the project. And we'll also, as part of this, put in the intersections that are part of the master plan for the development of the area. For the project, VS was the design firm, and then through the federal process, since there's federal funds in this project, we have to go out for construction inspection services. We went out to, I believe it was 5 firms. Yeah, 5 firms. HWC Engineering was the highest ranked from the 5 proposals received. And we have agreed to a contract to not to exceed amount of $433,001.20. Available for any questions? Yes.
So when I think of that space and the whole Hopewell rebuild, there's going to be a ton of construction on there. So is it better to wait for all that construction traffic to just kill the current road worse and then build in, or you really need to reconstruct the baseline road structure and utilities before the construction all gets put in place? We may have to fix up the asphalt on top from all the trucks, but the basic road has to be constructed, because now's the time to do it, when no buildings are around and you need to make a mess and build up.
So I would say there's a few different ways to go about it. One of the items for this project is the timing of the federal funding. And so we have to, before, I believe March would be the last letting date for NDOT. And so we have to secure a contract before March of next year. But for this, kind of my view of the project as we develop it, for example, for like Phase 1 East, there will be a new First Street, there'll be new Madison and new University. Mm-hmm. And so that really leaves your access from Morden for the southeast corner, and then for the northwest and northeast corners, we'll have Second Street. And so the hope is we have the Second Street project coming in 2025. And so our dream would be that we get developers in there and they can access from these non-reconstructed roads and destroy those as they do their projects and keep our new ones nice. The other part for First Street, for example, is as we develop, you really need the intersections to tie into and then take off from. And so a big part of that is setting the correct profile grades for the First Street project. And so with the First Street project, for each one of our intersections, we'll turn the corners at the radius for the intersection and then have a blunt end. And so they'll know exactly, as it develops, where to take off from. So right now, for example, we're looking at possibly the Jackson Street extension for a project. And so we know where we'll take off from on First Street, but to know where Jackson Street will end and what elevation will be correct to end it with, we're actually looking at going through a planning effort to set the road profiles for everything internal to that area, so that we know as people come forward and say, I want to develop this, we know what elevations and road profiles they'll match.
That's correct.
Yep. And so it really depends on how it lays in the current land, and then also how the amenities lay out. And the master plan envisioned these park facilities, and typically parks, small ones like this with large common space, you try to go for a pretty flat grade. And so as we come down the hill from the west to the east, basically from like Euclid down to Rogers, we'll have to almost stair step as we go through. So the detention ponds will have to be leveled out, and then we'll probably have stairs or something like that to take you down. But if you come to the road through ProWag, which is public right-of-way, we can travel at a steeper grade than we can inside the park facilities. So inside a park facility, the max would be 5%. along a road, we can run at whatever the road grade is. And so the average grade of the site being 8% or greater, which is what it is from basically Euclid down to Rogers, presents some unique design challenges for us. And so that's what that's the next phase. But I guess going back to your original question, this is a really long answer. I don't know how I've talked this long, but we're looking at trying to establish basically some of the infrastructure so that people know what to tie into and that it's there and ready for the development to take place, but also not fully box them in. We're trying to leave open areas for people to still access and destroy the road, which we know will happen.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the answer.
So dealing with this 433,000 on that, we're looking at 2.9 million in the federal funds. Is that correct? Do we have our baseline budget set out for the road? Because I'm assuming that's 80%. So our construction inspection fees is approximately 30% of the overall cost of the road, or am I just off on my math?
We will most likely be exceeding the required 20% match. I'd have to pull up my budget real quick to tell you the exact numbers.
I can tell you what we have in the project review form, if that's helpful.
Sure.
We had about $4.935 million overall for the project.
Overall, so we've spent,
$2 million that was coming from the consolidated TIF. From the federal roadway reconstruction is $2.9 million.
so we have about, I think that'd put us about 800 to 900,000. So we'd be closer to 4 million on the, 2.9. So we'd be closer to 4 million on the actual construction cost.
On the actual itself.
Yeah.
We've got our design fees of 700 plus 400 on our, so we're 1.1 million on a $4 million project for the fee structure coming in.
Correct.
How's that compared to other projects on a percentage basis?
So for construction inspection, about 14, the guidance is about 14% of your construction cost is what your construction inspection should be. And then design-wise, it really depends on the difficulties of the project. But typically in the 15 to 20% range of your construction costs. For federally funded projects, we always expect a higher design and inspection fees. The submittals, the paperwork that's required for that, plus the level of environmental investigations. We will always do environmental investigation, but when you have the federal funds, there are requirements that basically lead to higher environmental cost. And so looking at historic structures, impacts to those, the investigations related to that. And so I'm not exactly sure percent-wise. I'd have to look a little bit closer to give you a better answer than the general information I've provided.
So is it fair to say that probably this is coming in at a higher percentage on this project because of the federal dollars requiring a higher threshold of inspection, reporting, environmental due diligence? Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
One other question, can you give some examples of what a sub-consultant would be, and is that captured in the price that's submitted here?
So in this price, there is the sub-consultant that makes up the DBE percentage that's required by the basically NDOT sets a DBE percentage, and so this price contains the sub value to reach that DBE percentage.
So what would be an example of them having to hire a sub-consultant?
So for these federal projects, NDOT sets a disadvantaged business enterprise value. So if the prime is not a disadvantaged business enterprise, the only way to reach that percentage is to hire a sub-consultant to reach it. For construction, for example, there's a lot of very easy ones to use a lot. Trucking is a big one. And then landscaping is another one that we see a lot of DBEs used. In the consulting world, it basically is almost exclusively done by hiring sub-consultants for that percentage. For some projects, our prime, for example, Shrewsbury, is a DBE. And so we could count their entire contract for that, for Phase 1 East. Also for the demo, Renaissance is a WBE, and we could count the full percentage for that. For this one, the highest selected firm, HWC, is not a DBE, and so they elected to use a sub-consultant. Are required by the contract requirement, or by the DBE requirements, to select a sub-consultant that meets the DBE requirement. For inspection, typically it will be on like bigger pour days or something like that. I use pour, but it's probably placement. So for like on an asphalt laying day, they'd probably bring in the DBE so that they could help them with, for those operations, you're temping the trucks, you're pulling every single ticket, you're checking surface temperatures, you're watching the roller sequencing, and so they would bring in extra. And so instead of them bringing someone from their firm, they'd bring someone from this sub-consultant firm. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you. Are there any other questions from commissioners regarding Resolution 22-66?
When we're dealing with the road construction, as you said, to make sure they don't tear it up, is this something that we're looking at from a standpoint of being able to not utilize that particular road, or to direct it accordingly so that we don't have this reconstruction of one thing while we're looking at this request for proposals that will come out to developers? I mean, I understand setting the grade and such, but basically what we're doing is establishing that roadway, which will then be the determinant portion for the RFP that says it will be this, and, you know, the developer's ability to change anything will be fixed with our roadway. I'm just asking the question in regards to saying it's a chicken and egg is the unfortunate thing, and we're moving forward with that portion as we.
So in addition to the road setting, the lot constraints or the established grades, we also are replatting all the land. And so once we replat it and set those right-of-ways, they can only be modified by going through council. And so, it's, we're locking the developers in definitely in the plat. We can adjust lot lines, we can combine lots, but once we set the right-of-way, and council has been pretty firm in their not changing the right-of-way. And so that's one way that we're locking in the actual development sites. But in addition, we're trying to take a full site view of this and not developer by developer. And we see it a lot with you know, a developer putting in retaining walls, for example, so that they can have their road elevation in a certain configuration that helps their buildings on their site. Some people have set building plans that they just go and plop on a site, and so they need everything to come up to them and only sit a certain way. And so, for example, if there was that retaining wall, it would be cost prohibitive for a future development to take place adjacent to it, because they might not be able to connect to that road because the retaining wall would block them, or drainage structures or something else like that would block them or make it more cost prohibitive. So I think looking at the whole site and finding the best layout for the right-of-way and the infrastructure will ensure that development across the site can happen, I guess, more equally. One developer building a single building won't make it cost prohibitive or lower the value of our other lots because of what one developer did. If we set all of our road grades so that we have good site development areas, we ensure that every developer that comes in should, as long as they don't make, we can make the wrong assumptions and be wrong, and maybe the developer will show us that. But overall, I think we are setting up the best situation for the whole site to be developed more uniformly, and so that will lead to better infrastructure for the city long-term, and hopefully will lead every parcel able to be developed versus, possibly creating a parcel that's undevelopable because of what developed around them. I'll use Phase 1 East, for example. We are assuming finished floor elevations and assuming what the buildings may look like to determine how to service them with utilities. For example, like along Second Street, Second Street's higher than what we're going to end up with our alleys that are going to be behind. So our assumption is that most likely you will have your first floor walk-in from Second Street, which will create basically a basement on the backside accessed by the alley. Seems logical that they would put parking down there or something of that nature. So then, because of looking at it from that perspective, we then know the elevation of all of our utility tie-ins. So then we look to Second Street and say, is Second Street, are the utilities there deep enough, or do I need to run a parallel line in the alley so that they can tie in? And so we're looking at all of those, we're looking at how a developer would develop the site to then determine where best to service them from, in the hopes of not tearing up our new infrastructure and not stifling the development with anything that we do. And then if we set it up correctly, then any developer can come in and pick any parcel, develop what is a reasonable building, and someone can do the same thing next to them, and it shouldn't prevent any of that. Hopefully.
Starting from the south, working your way to the north towards Second Street in a sequenced way. Consolidated TIF dollar-wise, when we look at this project as an overall basis, not just construction contract, design, construction, also the additional. I know we don't have to look at what the return is based upon what the assessed value will be at a later date, but percentage-wise, in consideration to TIF, do we have the adequate funds to continue to move that forward before we have any development ideas at all? We got a great master plan, no questions. I'm just asking that question from a financial standpoint. Maybe a Jeff question.
Yeah. Jeff, are you able to take a stab at that? I know that that's part of the budget that you've created, so.
Yeah, I mean, this is a part of the commitment that we made to develop a project that we committed about $25 million to it. So essentially, that's the stake in the ground that we have, and that relates back to Deb's presentation last time as we continue to look at what's going to be necessary and how are we going to fund those things. But so in this particular case, yeah, the funding, we've set that aside and can make that commitment on this project. And then as we move forward, obviously the how we develop it and in what process, but this will give us that foundation as we talk to developers and say, we've got an overall plan for how the streets and sewers and infrastructure is going to look, and then what's it going to take to build out for those parcels and what kind of returns are we going to get on those.
Overall, from a time frame standpoint, as we move this forward, we're looking at construction starting next year on this roadway.
For First Street, it should start this spring. The bid letting is scheduled for January, and so there's some utility relocations that need to take place, and we're working on getting those to notice to proceed so that they can be ahead of us. But we should be able to start breaking ground in the spring, at least in multiple areas. We're planning to overlap the First Street and Phase 1 East together, basically to stay out of IU Health's demo as much as possible, because First Street west of Rogers does require some of our future property that we'll have on IU Health's parcel. And so they would like to finish their demo and grade before we start moving over there. And so since we control Phase 1 East and First Street, we'd rather work those two contractors together. So it'll be up to the contractor exactly how they want to overlap them. Most likely will be two separate contractors, but they'll be able to work down First and College, and then there's the reconstruction of the Kroger entrance and the sidewalk and everything there, and then also on the south side, and then they'll move up to the B line. Will be a unique challenge for us, as we definitely want to keep an equal-sized facility open during that work, and so Morden will have to be a temporary B line for a little while, and so we'll have two projects that both need to be in Morden and do a lot of work in Morden. So it'll be some sequencing that we'll have to figure out as the projects proceed.
And then last question, in regards to our timeframes that we're looking for, construction-wise, you're saying it'll take what approximately? The reason I'm asking that is to say, at what point do we anticipate we'll be out for an RFP to get a developer to look at? I mean, it sounds like we're at least a couple of years away before we see anything that starts reverting itself back. I'm just trying to narrow this time frame a little. A developer for what he's specifically? The first portion that we will be letting out as far as an RFP is concerned. I mean, Paul's taking care of the hard stuff as far as getting the infrastructure in place. So once we have this First Street infrastructure there, will that allow that time frame to go ahead and concurrently go out to try to see what's coming back, so that we can, are we out 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah.
What's a realistic standpoint as we put this dollars and infrastructure in? So we're not literally, we can't control the overall economy or financial situations, but it's a very real situation to take into consideration.
Sure.
So that's why I'm just looking time frame wise.
Yeah.
If we have any idea.
So Patrick, I jump in as I say anything incorrectly, but so we're looking at sort of three phases right now where we could do an RFP, and sort of three different pieces are existing right now. And I say that a little bit carefully because we're not exactly sure. When you look at Phase 1 East as a piece of the larger project, that's basically a third of the site, as I've characterized to you guys. And so how we tackle that may be more than one RFP, right? What we're looking at now is, could we do an RFP, excuse me, on what is known as Parcel 10, which is the western piece of the project south of First Street. So right now where some medical office buildings are, it's those last two as you go down First on the south side of the property. I can't remember the addresses, but they're twin buildings, kind of brown brick. So that is Parcel 10, and that's where the master plan had some single family, some possible more units on a lot there. So we're looking at, because that's a unique parcel in the master plan, meaning it's not multifamily housing as much as it is like single family or duplex or something. Could we do an RFP or an RFI that gets out sooner rather than later on that? Then we look at Phase 1 East and how we tackle that. Then there's the core building, which is very heavily dependent on First Street. So that project, Patrick and I in fact talked today about how that timing works with the redevelopment of the core building, because there's some other infrastructure there that has to be built out. So it's kind of three phases as far as RFIs or development prospects go that are sort of directly impacted by First Street. So that's what I would. Patrick, you have anything to add there?
Oh, I would just say for Phase 1 East, I think the north northwest and northeast quadrants pretty soon after Phase 1 East is started. I think I would have no objections if we wanted to go out with RFIs for that, because those are just large tracts of land, and we're gonna once we establish our road grades and everything, there will be open land that I think we could possibly, if the timing worked out and if that's what our consultant thinks is the best approach. So I don't. First Street, I think, is going to finish because of landscaping and such in the spring of 2024. Phase 1 East is going to look at about the exact same schedule. And so I think, at least the last conversations I was in, we were talking about sometime in the spring of 23 going out with maybe some RFIs. Or am I too early?
On Phase 1 East?
On Phase 1
I
East?
think that's about right. if not
Okay.
sooner.
And so they talked about a year for them to, get their projects ready. And so that seems to coincide with them getting in there, right as we're finishing up Phase 1 East and hopefully getting completed before Second Street comes along in 2025. So there's a lot of things need to fall in place, but we're planning for them. And worst case, we can hold out some sections if we have to on our projects.
Primary thing is to get your infrastructure on the First Street end, gives us a baseline to start with, then we work ourselves in. Just, when I ask this, trying to figure out how we bought a lot of these properties, we're investing our dollars out of our consolidated TIF, and with that, at what point does it start to we're rebuilding the city.
See some ROI, right?
See a little bit of ROI as far as activity.
Right.
Because the activity and the people are what makes the community. We can build the best buildings in the world, but if they're 10 years off and they don't have people coming in, then it's just a dead space. So that's why I asked these questions on the time frame. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, any other questions from commissioners on Resolution 22-66? Any comments from the public?
Yes. I'm Mike Carmen. This may all be perfectly fine. My concern is kind of an overall concern with appropriate use of TIF money, because it's not a slush fund just to fund any project that somebody in the city may want. But there's absolutely nothing in this resolution that justifies TIF money on this. The description of the project resolution has almost no relationship to your explanation. Yours was far broader about other things. We've got a budget in here in the Resolution 2026, and yet the project description says, well, it may go as far as Patterson Drive, it may go as far east as Walnut Street. You don't even know what the project is. How do you have a budget for an undefined project? You don't even know what your cost, there's no way you can estimate your cost. We have a statement, this legal position that the project is permissible use of TIF increment under Indiana code. What project did they evaluate for that? Because the project description in the resolution doesn't justify it. So I'm not saying that it can't be or it shouldn't be, but I'm telling you the documentation doesn't justify it. And this is more of a problem when some other things you're doing, including the other resolution, whether you're going to get to that tonight or not, whether that's an appropriate TIF. But this is symptomatic of what I think is a continuing problem of you're turning the TIF money into a slush fund by just willy-nilly making it available to anybody in the city administration has a project they want funded. And that's particularly galling because of the consolidated TIF that you have. Tap Road, Fulton Pike, TIFs that had projects designed that should have been done to help promote development in those areas were lost. They were captured when you consolidated the TIF, so the money could all be spent on Switchyard Park, the Trades District, and now Hopewell Park. And that's at the expense of developing out west on Tap Road and in the Fulton Pike area. So there's a real cost to doing this, and so if you're going to use TIF money, it needs to be appropriate. I don't know how you passed the but-for test that should have been considered, because you don't have a project description that gets you past that, but for this expenditure of money that some proposed development or anticipated development would not occur. That's your but-for test. That's a requirement for you to be spending TIF money for anything. So as a general objection to, maybe it's an appropriate use of TIF money, but I can't tell that from the documents from the record. And so that's gonna be the first time, and not last time you're gonna hear me objecting to projects, because it's time to start taking a harder look at how we're spending money, and this is one.
Thank you. Any comment or clarification from staff?
If the commissioners would like, I'd be happy to provide clarification, otherwise.
Yeah, I'd be asking for that.
Yeah, so a viable project for the consolidated TIF, and in this case, First Street where this project is completely within as far as the consolidated TIF, it's in the expanded Adams Crossing and the Seminary area TIF, the entire road for this entire project. TIF is eligible to be spent on local public improvements, which have classically been part of the infrastructure redevelopment of sites. This is kind of one of those projects in terms of refinishing this road and preparing it for the redevelopment of the site that fits squarely within those kind of local redevelopment projects and local public improvements that TIF is eligible for.
Thank you. All right, any questions or comments on Resolution 22-66 from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, I will move to approve Resolution 22-66.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes. On Resolution 22-65, do we have anyone to speak to that?
Mr. Wasted has requested that be continued to the October 17th meeting.
Okay, we will also continue that. Is there any other
Probably should
business?
have a motion, so
Okay.
as a point of order, Madam
All right,
President, so a
thank
motion
you.
and a second to just continue that to the next meeting.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to continue it to next month.
Deborah Myerson, I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, we will continue that, thank you. Next item of business, is there any general discussion needed tonight? Not hearing any, I will ask for a motion that we adjourn.
So moved, Deb Hutton?
And seconded, Sarah Bowerly-Dansman.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.